This afternoon I want to talk to you a bit about perceptions. And this is something that I talk about every year or two or so, off and on, because it's an important topic. Uh, we oftentimes don't think about how other people see us or how other people see our organization, the Iguandal. Um, and we don't maybe often give that the thought that we should from time to time, particularly as it regards ourselves. And I've had a couple of experiences actually really recently, very positive, but nonetheless that revealed the shortcomings in that thought process to me very, very graphically. And so the first item here is a brief personal story. Those of you who know me and have had occasion to meet me in person when I've been out in Los Angeles know that I am an enormous person. I'm nearly 7 feet tall, shade over 300 pounds, really, really a big guy. And I'm very keenly aware of my size when I interact with other people. I also don't have any hair, and so I've been told every now and again that makes me appear a bit intimidating from time to time for some reason.
I think if you guys imagine a James Bond villain, that's Bill.
Thanks, Derek. but yes, I'm really, really big. And so over the years, I've tried to mitigate my size by being really soft-spoken and very gentle, and except on the rare occasions when it's been necessary for me to get somebody's attention, to not have my size be an influence as to how other people perceive me. I never thought that those efforts at putting other people at ease really had paid off too terribly much. I always was concerned that overcoming that first visual impression might be very well impossible for me. And until I got my performance review for my third year at Simon Property a couple of weeks back, and my boss told me in part that the way that I carry myself and present myself has actually caused for people there to find me approachable and likable and friendly. That for most of the people there, when they first see me, it is somewhat intimidating or scary at first, but once they interact with me a bit, they find out that initial visual perception isn't supported by the person that I am. And that of everything that I heard during that review was the thing that made me the happiest, because I don't ever want to be perceived as a forceful, thug-like, intimidating individual. It doesn't benefit me at all to be looked at in that way, and I wouldn't do anything to nurture that image if I knew that it were so. and that little story points out, at least to me, how woefully wrong we can be when we think about how other people look at us. We tend, as human beings, to be very hard on ourselves and somewhat less hard on others. We tend to judge ourselves more critically than others judge us, and we tend to focus on our own flaws and faults more often than we do the positive aspects of our nature. And that's not altogether a terrible thing, because it allows us to mitigate those things in our personality that might put other people off. But that in and of itself may not be sufficient for one who cultivates the Tao teachings. Having other people view us in a positive light is a great beginning, but it isn't necessarily the end. And here's why. I'm going to utilize the Yiguandao as an organization, as well as my own personal life in an alliterative fashion here, because people's opinions of ourselves kind of reflect their opinions of our organization as well. The Yiguandao over the years has been viewed as a fringe religious organization. It's been peppered with derision and divisiveness and prejudicial thinking and some really not very nice commentary from all kinds of people all over. Yeah. We've been the target on the internet for an awful lot of malicious thinking and writing, and most of that is based in ignorance. But in the absence of good information or firsthand experience or firsthand knowledge and wisdom, the perceptions of people regarding the Yiguandao is what forms the basis for the opinions of people who don't know us. And so the view from the mainstream very often is that we're a cult or a fringe religious organization that still worships the ancestors and lines people up to donate their houses and life savings to us, and all sorts of other things that have been seen in some cults. And we tend to get lumped into that general category of cultish behavior by those who don't know and those who don't understand. Every time the news or the media picks up on a story like what occurred in Waco, Texas, or what happened with the followers of John Applewhite, or more notoriously Jim Jones in Guyana, or any other example where a fringe group has committed some kind of a really egregious breach of basic human rights and dignity, that gets spread all over the news, and people see it everywhere. And the Yiguandao is not yet really well known in the United States. In the West in general, that's changing rapidly, but still we're not real well known. And people tend to place us in that same general category of cults and fringe organizations whose motivations may not be completely open and whose intentions may not be completely honorable. Forming that opinion in the minds of other people based on information that's not directly derived from the organization can cause for people to look at us in a really negative light. Likewise, at a very personal level, at an individual level, having folks draw opinions of us based on conjecture, speculation, rumor, and opinion can do the very same thing. And that's something, believe it or not, that we have the power to change. We hear it say all the time, you never get a second chance to make a good first impression. What's that first impression do to somebody? Well, it forms a perception of us as individuals and of whatever it is we represent at the moment. For instance, at work, that first impression is about me and my abilities as a database administrator and programmer, among other things. And the image of one influences the image of both. And so the perception of my nature and personality and abilities go hand in hand with the perception of my size. It's kind of silly, really, but it absolutely happens. And that first impression is made in under 30 seconds. So that means that every time I meet someone for the first time, I figure I have 10 or 15 seconds to implant a positive and enduring good first impression. The opinion of others as regards us as individuals, no matter what we say, is at least passingly important, particularly within a circle of employment or within an organization of any kind. The way that we're perceived is going to get around, good or bad, either one. We're either going to be known as people who can get things done, people who are worth believing, people who know what they're doing, or we're going to be viewed as the opposite. And most of the time, that view is going to be from the outside looking in. It isn't going to be based on the knowledge of those who are closest to us, those who interact with us every day, those with whom we formed friendships and perhaps bonds of either common work or common interests or common something else. It's going to be based on the rumor and innuendo gathered around the water cooler in the hallway. And gossip is always better when the person in question is being defamed to the nth degree. Heaven knows, Derek and I have both seen this at work, not even just in a context of ignorance and the absence of good knowledge, but out of flat-out malicious intent. And it's very difficult to undo the perception that's created when somebody sets out to bring the reputation and image of a person low. I'm at the point, and have been for a number of years, where I flat out refuse to respond to those kind of posts and comments and what have you, because no matter what you say, when you answer some of these folks, it's only an invitation to an argument or a fight. And I've also discovered over the years that, quite frankly, it's not possible to change somebody else's heart or mind if they don't have a desire to change. Within the Tao community at large, not specifically the Iguan Tao, but the community of all of the people that we know of who refer to themselves as followers of the Tao, on a variety of different websites, forums, and organizations such as ours, there is still a tremendous amount of infighting and backstabbing and arguing and flaming and all sorts of aberrant behavior that within the circle of those who say they follow the Tao just plain should not be. And yet it's there. To be on the tea house for any amount of time, one will see within a day that there are always arguments over what this means, how it was written, what Lao Tzu said, what he didn't say, whether or not it's translated correctly, whether or not it's interpreted correctly, and most of that based on opinion instead of knowledge and an intense and burning desire to be right. Those two things have no place in the following of the authentic, true Tao teachings. No place at all. And yet we're still faced with them. Derek and I personally get them from time to time. I expect by the end of this talk that there will be somebody out there on the web somewhere that's going to be after me again, and that's okay. I've come to understand that when you presume to get up and state your own mind in a public forum, somebody's going to be waiting to shoot it off. And that's okay. But it points up the importance of certain parts of the Tao teachings, perhaps more so than others. In this case, the importance of creating harmony, for instance. The creation of a harmonious relationship where it's possible is the thing that diffuses these conflicts the most quickly. I have actually seen Master William do this. It's been several years now, but I was out there and had occasion to see him conversing with another individual who was perhaps every bit as opinionated as myself, and maybe more so, and every bit as vociferous about being heard. And finally, Master William just looked at this gentleman and said, "You know, you're right." And that's where it ended. By being the person who created the harmony there, by using humility and the absence of words, by refusing to get into that argument, that conflict, that debate, Master William diffused it with one phrase. And I've never forgotten having seen that. Okay? Diffusing conflict is the biggest thing that we do when we create harmony between people. We also turn contention into peace. The contention of conflicting emotions, opinions, views, the things that sometimes just define us as people. I see it this way, you see it another way. But by creating harmony, there can be space for all different opinions without judging any one to be better or worse than any others. And when we're dealing with matters of opinion and not fact, that's the truth. By creating harmony, we can provide perspective to those who lack perspective and scope. Very often from a position of ignorance, a person will speak on something that they don't understand based on a very limited amount of information, and perhaps without understanding whether or not that information was good and factual and truthful to begin with. Okay? When we disarm the conflict, when we turn the contention into peacefulness, we provide that scope and that perspective based on wisdom and knowledge that says, maybe we can look at it this way. Doing those things smooths the friction of human relationships. It eases out some of the bumps on the path. It relieves the tension that exists between people. It is perhaps one of the most important things that we do as cultivators of the Tao teachings to help keep things peaceful and harmonious and moving along smoothly. Equally, if perhaps not more important, is humility. Humility is that factor or that function of our core personality that allows us to lower ourselves, to debase ourselves a little bit, if you will. Perhaps that's not the best word, but to withdraw from that need to be right or to be heard, to quiet the emotions so that the harmonious relationship can be created. By giving up that need to be right, the need to be heard, the need to argue, by humbling ourselves to others, whether we really need to do so or not, whether we want to do so or not, we remove the opportunity for conflict and for tension. It is a natural virtue-born humility that takes us out of the fight, that keeps people from hurting us and us from hurting them. Humility is inclusive instead of exclusive, right? When we're in a group or being heard or read by a group, when we're involved with more people than just ourselves, humility brings everyone into the conversation, all of the opinions, all of the thoughts, all of the people, and treats them all with a degree of decorum and dignity and respect so that no one feels demeaned or left out. Humility removes the focus from the self So despite my large physical presence, by exercising some humility, I become invisible and allow harmony to be created around me. In other words, it takes the focus completely off my size and puts it on the situation. Humility is the absolute root of unattached action. It gives up the need to possess or control, the need to glorify the self, the need to be noticed. And I've found over the years that I can do a lot more when I'm not worrying about who's going to see what, and I just concentrate on getting the job done. By giving up the attachments, I also give up the anxiety and stress that I would have if I were worrying about what happened if I made a mistake or didn't do something properly. Okay? I'm going to make mistakes. I do that all the time. But I found that by not holding on to what I do, by not arguing the point, by not pushing and fighting, that I can get along with the people a lot better, and people will tend to forgive mistakes if they're based in ignorance and dealt with honestly. Whereas if I had a huge ego going in, then those mistakes would be an opportunity for someone to really step on me, and that could be rather painful and unpleasant. In addition, moderation leads to the creation of harmony and peacefulness between people. Extremism of any kind leads to imbalance in the individual. We tend to speak of extremism in terms of emotions and desires, but really any form of extremism is a sign of imbalance in the person. And those imbalances can crop up in a number of ways to get us into trouble. Very often, extremes of emotion and thought lead to self-aggrandizement, and self-aggrandizement leads to hubris. Hubris is extreme arrogance. It's the philosophy of me to the extreme. I can do no wrong. I'm always right. Everybody ought to be reasonable and do it my way. When those sorts of words and thoughts start to pop up, it's time to run. Those things also have no place in Tao cultivation. Pride and arrogance almost always create ill will and disrupt harmony between people. The person who forcefully stands up and says, do it my way, is a target for everyone else if that person's plan fails to work. Okay? Arrogance almost always leads to calamity. Almost always. You can either be right or you can be nasty about being right, but you can't be both. And in Tao cultivation, we do our best to give up that need to be right, that need to be heard, by not attaching ourselves to the things that we do. We have no need to promote what we did. We simply do it and get out of the way. That's why moderation keeps the extremes of emotions and actions in check. We're not obligating ourselves or tying ourselves to the outcome of a particular task to reinforce a reputation, a point, or ourselves. The importance of integrity in creating harmony can't be overstated either. And I'll bet by now you're all wondering what all this has to do with perception. I promise you I'm getting there. Integrity from a Taoist perspective, from a perspective of cultivating the Tao teachings, is honesty without belittling or demeaning another person. It's honesty without making another person feel worthless. It's being virtuous without having to stand up and talk about it. if we have to get up on a soapbox and preach about how virtuous we are, we're likely not quite virtuous enough. Integrity is wise without causing strife, without causing discomfort and ill will, without sowing the seeds of discord between people. The Tao cultivator's version of integrity is absolute, but it's silent. This is something that it took me a long time to learn. That silent strength, that integrity without flag waving, that honesty without putting other people ill at ease is not too terribly difficult to do and awfully important to understand. Because the brand of integrity that waves flags and banners and yells and carries on creates problems between people. Even when we're right in that case, we are dead wrong. And so, for those of us who cultivate the Tao teachings, integrity without words, that quiet strength, that will of absolute iron, that presence about us that says this is a person who can be counted on to do what is right, is what's important. Confucius always talked about the radiation of virtue and goodness, if you will, from a person to a family to a village to a society, a country, to the world. Well, there's a lot of truth in what he said, because the perception of the individual, that is how others look at us, colors the opinions of that person with regard to the activities of the person in question. Right? As I said earlier, the perception of me as being large and somewhat scary carries with it a couple of other negative connotations. Very often people who are very large are seen as being slow and dim-witted and unintelligent. And I happen to be none of those things. But it's a societal judgment, if you will, that follows that perception wherever it goes. And other perceptions carry with them the same sorts of duality, if you will, a certain amount of positive and a certain amount of negative, none of which may be based in reality. But that doesn't matter. It follows just the same. So, what of the Iguandao? Are we a cult? We've been called a cult a number of times. Or a fringe religion? We've seen that as well. How's about a secret society? I've seen that a couple of times. I'm not sure where that comes from. We are in fact none of those things. But the importance of the perception is so high here that we have to publish what it is we stand for and what it is we do and do not do. One of the huge things is that we do not demand support from the congregants in the Iguandao. It is the masters and ordained masters who support the work of the temple, and they do that out of their own pockets. And they do that so that the temple itself is pure. The only time anyone solicits money from a Tao cultivator is when they're initiated. And for that, they ask for what's called a token of $10 to jumpstart the Tao of giving in the lives of the new cultivator. Other than that, any giving that an individual does at the temple is done based on their own heart and their own feelings. The temple doesn't take anything from anyone. The temple doesn't insist that the members commit themselves to a monastic lifestyle or to a life of proselytizing and evangelizing. It is our example that we want other people to see a difference in the way that we live, in the way that we do things, in the way that things happen for us, that will help other people to ask the question, gee, why are you like that? How did you get to the point where these things are happening for you? And even when people ask those questions, a lot of the time they're not going to be ready for what the answer is. But that's not important. At that moment, we plant a seed in an action from an example, from a couple of words that maybe one day sprouts and helps another person learn to become a Tao cultivator, to find the truth and the power in these teachings when they're practiced from an authentic and truly honest perspective. The other thing that we have to guard against as an organization and as individuals, I suppose, is the fact that fear is a powerful motivator, and people tend to fear what they don't understand. I've seen this happen before, particularly surrounding a couple of initiations here in Indiana, where despite my best efforts to explain the whys, wheres, how-tos, and wherefores, a couple of people didn't understand. At the time, I didn't do a good enough job of explaining. I wasn't clear enough, or something. Okay, and it caused a problem for them because they feared what might be expected of them once they were initiated. Well, okay, that one was my fault. But it's a fairly easy fault to correct. And that's one of the reasons I have this talk every now and again. There are no expectations placed on the initiates in the Guandao. None. You can be initiated and continue to live your life any old way you want for the rest of your life, hopefully making your life easier, smoother, and better by cultivating the Tao teachings. It is not until one desires to go through the Qingkou ritual, either to become a Tiansu or simply just to cleanse the mouth and adopt the vegetarian lifestyle, that the expectations begin. And, well, Derek, I know you don't own a shrine yet. I don't know what the expectations are for one who goes through the Qingkou that does not own a shrine. I don't know if they're different or not, so I'm going to let Derek speak to that particular question. In my case, there are some expectations that that other folks who don't have a shrine are not expected to adhere to. But I knew what those expectations were up front and had been doing them for a number of years to begin with, well in advance of becoming a Tiansu. Okay? It wasn't something that was foreign to me. It wasn't a surprise. Nobody snuck up behind me and said, oh, by the way. Okay? Nothing is done under the covers or behind closed doors. It's all as transparent as it can possibly be. That transparency abates fear and misinformation and sets aside the malice of those who were pushing their own agenda. I'm running a little over. I'm sorry, I'll tie up quickly here. The key points to keep in mind, the takeaway here is that perception becomes reality in the minds of people in the absence of firsthand knowledge or experience. Okay, that's the truth. Sometimes perception is based purely on conjecture, and that's almost never an accurate picture. However, how we present ourselves to others will also in part determine others' views of our lives and our actions. And so if we present ourselves living a smooth, joyous, easy, virtuous life, people are going to ask questions about how we got there. They will. And it will be the example that we set before them that will be the motivator for the questions. The principles from the Tao teachings is one way to keep those perceptions of us and what we do and how we live positive, and to keep our lives smooth and joyful and contented, and to make this path available for many others in our lives as best we know how. And really, at the end of the day, that's kind of the thing that's important, is that in our own lives we have joy and contentment, and in the lives of others we help to set the right example and hopefully help them to find what we found here. Thank you all very much. I truly hope something that I said here was useful for somebody.
Thank you, Bill. I do want to contribute a couple of points and also answer your question, Bill. About myself having gone through the Chinko ritual. What does that mean, etc. So, for those of you who don't really know me or Bill all that well, we've both chosen this particular path, the path of the Tao. Later on, and I'll tell you why we chose that path. Now, before I get to that, let me just point out that Bill and I are different individuals. We have different personalities, and therefore we're choosing to follow the Tao in our own individual ways. So a lot of times what I say is that Bill follows the religious path, and I follow a secular path. So for Bill, the emphasis is on the religious aspect of it, and that's why he is a shrine owner, what we call Tanzu, and he provides spiritual leadership from that religious standpoint. It's a very powerful practice that he follows. I have seen dramatic change in his life. I have seen how people react to him. I have seen how people hear what he says. When he makes a presentation, and what he did years before and what he's doing today is certainly dramatically different. If Bill was to go back to listen to himself talk or look at his old presentations, he himself is going to notice those differences. So the path that he follows is very powerful. He owns that shrine. He practices the rituals every day, and he's gone through the Chinko ritual as a prerequisite to owning that shrine. So I do not own a shrine. My parents do have a shrine. I am not a shrine owner myself, and the path that I follow is different from Bill's in that I put the emphasis, as you guys see in my books, it's on the secular practice of the philosophy of the Tao. So the reason, now there's definitely going to be some overlap between the two. So you can hear plenty from Bill about the philosophy of the Tao. That was the basis of his religious practice. And from me, you will also see me following religious practices. Before I began today's talk, before I began today's meeting, I was here at the temple. I was upstairs. I was kneeling in front. I was at the shrine, kneeling in front of the altar, and I was following my own mini ritual in the hopes that what I say today will be beneficial to the people that are listening in. So there's overlap between the two. It's not a cut and dry, black and white kind of thing. It's like a yin and yang symbol. Yin within yang, yang within yin. Now, so let me explain a little bit about the reason why Bill and I follow this particular path. And also let me explain why I would say that it's not like we have a choice. This is the path that we have to follow. What do I mean by that? There are many, many people that I come across, especially in the West, that they all started out in a similar way as me and Bill. That is, they've read about the Tao. They get a couple of books, they became interested, intrigued, so they start reading up on it. And then in the course of that experience of, that initial experience of getting to know the concepts that the ancient Tao sages talked about, they become, profoundly impressed. They find themselves wanting to get more into it. So a natural consequence of that will be these people, just like me, just like Bill, asking, well, where can I get more? How can I get in touch with the authentic source of this? Now, if you were to ask just anyone, maybe a college professor somewhere that specializes in religious studies, the answer you may get would be something like, well, there's religious Taoism. Why don't you look into that? Well, if you do look into it, you find that it's really kind of far apart from what you were hoping for as you were reading about the Tao, because the emphasis is on the pantheon of deities, and there are so incredibly many deities. And even Lao Tzu is a deity in religious Taoism. So you may investigate for a while, and then you may back away and say, well, wait a minute, that's not what I had in mind. I want something where the emphasis is on how to live my life, how I can become a better person, how I can cultivate the Tao, how I can live life just like the ancient sages, full of ease, smoothness, effectiveness, excellence, all that good stuff. That's what I want. I'm not looking for something that religious Taoism has become. Okay, you may say that, but then you will then come upon the realization that if you want a path that it emphasizes personal cultivation, i.e. becoming a better person, using the philosophies of the Tao, using what the ancient sages taught, then, well, this path is it. There really isn't any other, prominent choice out there. So that's the reason why I say it's not like me and Bill have a choice in the matter. This is it. We have to follow this path because this path is what we're looking for. It does what we want it to do, and we're not trying to figure out who all the deities are in the Taoist pantheon. So even then, let me say that the reason why there are so many deities in the religious Taoist pantheon is because people have a deep-seated need to see some of these concepts personified. Okay, they have a deep-seated need to see all concepts personified, and that's why there are so many. So even within Yiguan Dao, there are many people for whom the only thing they know really is a background in Buddhism. So they will always keep trying to make the Tao about the Buddhas instead of about themselves, instead of about their own personal cultivation. That's a result of their cultural background. Does that make sense to everybody? So, but that's not what this was intended to be. This is intended to be about the formless Tao that is ever present. This is about the Tao in your life. This is about following the path, a path in life that calls upon you to be the best person that you can be. So I'm going to jump off my soapbox, but that's kind of why we have to do what we do. Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, actually, the process you described was exactly what I went through. I started looking for these answers when I was 13, and it took years. There was no authentic Tao in this country when I was 13. It just didn't exist yet. But I always knew there was a better set of answers, and so, yeah, once I encountered this, there was literally no choice. I knew I could have chosen differently, but not really. I knew the second that I walked into the temple in LA that this was where I belonged. And when that happens, it's kind of irrefutable. It's a choice, but it's not really a choice.
Yeah, a bit of a paradox there for everybody.